We have a lot going on this morning. Good morning to you. Coming up at 6:35, Richard Newton. He is a lieutenant general. He is a former bomber pilot, many years in the Air Force. These days, he is a military and political analyst for News Nation and also for Nashville's Morning News. Looking forward to speaking to him. Coming up at 6:35 at 7:06, Brian Wilson is going to be here in studio. Looking forward to Brian being here. We're going to, of course, talk about the biggest issue of the morning, which is the ongoing situation in Iran. Brian also has a source, Joan, inside NES, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what goes on when some of these politicians and some of these country stars call NES and say, hey, look, my power's out, and, do we know when it's going to be back on? And what that does, what impact does that have on the rest of Nashvillians getting their power back on? So we're going to talk about a number of different things with Brian Wilson. And again, that is coming up at 7:06 here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, 7:35. You do have Scott Desjardins, Congressman, who will also be joining us. And so one of the things that as the bombing does continue in Iran, of course, bombing other Middle Eastern nations as well, Doha, the United Arab Emirates, to name just a few. Dubai is another one. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry, Joan. All right, so I want to play a piece of audio for you, and this is Senator Mark Kelly. He has come out, and this kind of went viral, I think probably for the wrong reasons. First of all, Democrats not liking what the president is doing, has done in Iran, as it is as predictable as the sun going up. This is Senator Mark Kelly, and this was the morning after the attacks began.
Hey, folks, this morning, the United States, this administration launched a major attack on Iran. As I see this, hey, there's no real plan here. And often these things do not go the way people think they do, especially the people that don't serve in the military, like this president. Often they're the ones that think every solution is to drop a bomb. And by the way,
I love how he says, he makes a point to say that Donald Trump never served, right? Last time I checked, neither did Joe Biden. Last time I checked, neither did Barack Obama. So I think that is kind of a really petulant and petty thing to say, this Democrat Senator Mark Kelly. Here's more.
This is the guy that got us into this mess anyway. He, in his first term, he ripped up the Iran nuclear deal, which then put the Iranians on a path to further enrich uranium. Did that strike this summer that operationally was a success. Strategically, as we see now, not so much.
So clearly, number one, again, no, Donald Trump never served, but he's got military advisors all around him. And here's the other thing. Whether it is the first strike against Iran or when we took out Maduro or, took Maduro in, those were just precisely, exquisitely planned. Now, if you'd like to talk about Joe Biden's horrifically planned pullout of Afghanistan, Mark Kelly, we certainly can. But, if you're going to sit here and you're going to try to say, oh, Donald Trump has no plan, I don't know about that, because he has actually done now, I believe, 3, because I think that this was a well-executed plan, this attack against Iran. And so he now has 3 really well-executed military operations that he has been able to, with his military advisors, been able to implement. So for Mark Kelly, again, not real surprising, but we took out the leader of Iran, and at least now, and the number keeps going up, 48 other officials as well. But, this was a mission that had multiple fronts. And yes, again, we took out military targets, we took out political targets, we took out targets connected to the Islamic Republic, infrastructure related to the military, Iranian oil fields and airfields, I should say. So, yeah, it seems to me like there was a plan and it was executed. And so I think that for a lot of these Democrats, if this military operation ends up being the success that Donald Trump believes that it's going to be, and that I hope that it will be, and I do believe that it'll be a success, then some of these comments they're just not going to age well. Rachel Maddow, of course, she came out over the weekend as well.
And when you, Donald Trump, in your baseball hat, proclaimed on that weird taped message today that the Iranian police and the security forces and the Revolutionary Guard must surrender, they must lay down their weapons, as Donald Trump said this morning at 2:30, if that was what you wanted to happen, because you wanted the domestic security situation to become less dangerous for the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government, if you actually wanted to make that happen, instead of just saying it, you as the U.S. government, maybe you as the U.S. government in coalition with other allies that you might have bothered to bring on board, you might have given the Iranian police and Revolutionary Guard and security services some instructions on how to surrender and lay down their weapons.
Hey, can anybody answer this question? Does Rachel Maddow have like secret clearances and top secret clearances and that kind of thing? How the H does she know what has been offered and what hasn't? Now, the president came out, this was last night, played this audio earlier, and he said that some of these military troops in Iran, that they have, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, that they have now begun to lay down their arms. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see if Richard Newton has anything to say about this when I have him on at 6:35. But she also says something about bringing our allies in the region on board. She says if he had bothered to bring our allies in the region on board, some were and some weren't. I think that everybody, all of our allies, have obviously concerns. But Donald Trump has been working on this since he came back into office. As a matter of fact, he's been working on this for years, since the first administration. But you remember that tour of the Middle East that Donald Trump took? This was, I don't even remember when it was, but Joan, you were with me. You and I were talking about this. It was the United Arab Emirates. I think he went to Doha as well. But that's part of what he was doing. He was getting our allies on board. But here's the deal. If we sat around and waited for the Middle East to agree to all of this, we would never take any action ever.
Or if we were Joe Biden or any other typical politician. President Trump isn't a politician. He's a transactional dude that gets it. He just gets it.
Joan, Shingang, I'm going to pronounce right. Shanga Koala.
Koala.
Do you know, I think it's that last part where he musters out koala or whatever that was that I find especially funny.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if it was actually even koala, but he says kuwawa.
By the way, did you see before all this happened, I think it was Friday at some point. I didn't even bother to play the audio, pull the audio. He's completely irrelevant at this point. But Joe Biden is out there. I guess he's now on the banquet circuit, Joan. And so he's out there. And you know what's odd? It's been, a year or so since he's been out of office, and he still makes no sense. Iran ended up launching drones at Israel, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iraq. They fired at our military installations and our allies. And so, the bombing does continue. Somebody's saying, hey, Dan, you're going to mention this is one of the haters, Joan. I don't think he's a hater, but I had a few people actually mention this. Hey, Dan, you're going to mention that the polling shows that people across America don't approve of the attacks against Iran. I mentioned it in the 5 twice. It was actually part of a larger conversation that we had.
Wake up early, dude.
Listen. You miss a moment, you miss a lot on Nashville's Morning News.
What the heck?
Here's more from Rachel Maddow.
You probably could have taken some steps to help that happening, to make sure they can organize and can communicate, right? Maybe you would have turned the internet back on.
All right, so that is Rachel Maddow. Memo to Rachel Maddow. Elon Musk has been doing this for a while now, helping out the people of Iran. So,
and didn't we hack their television network and give them a broadcast and let them know that we're behind them and they should rise up against their government?
We did all kinds of stuff. I mean, we hacked into their military apparatus as well. Tammy Duckworth, of course, another Democrat. This is what she had to say.
I'm deeply concerned that President Trump is breaking his promises to the American people yet once again. He said he would get us out of forever wars, and yet here we go. He's putting American lives and national security at risk by these strikes on Iran. It's clear to me that this is a long-planned, deeply calculated move by him.
So what's weird is you just heard her say that this is part of a long-planned, deeply calculated move. And I guess I'm a little confused because another Democrat, Mark Kelly, I just played you the audio where he said,
as I see this, hey, there's no real plan here.
So the Democrats can't seem to get their talking points correct, right? So did he have no plan, according to Mark Kelly? Or did Donald Trump have a long-planned plan, according to Senator Tammy Duckworth? I have no idea. You know, these...
Well, hey, Senator Tammy Duckworth, if you were part of the Gang of Eight, which you are not, you would know what was happening beforehand. Because President Trump informed the gang. He only got 7 of the Gang of Eight by phone before the strikes began.
Do you know what was awesome, Joan? I love that you brought that up. So on Saturday, you had all of these people on the left, of course, screaming, right, that Donald Trump didn't consult Congress, right? Remember that whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
And then out comes the news. Marco Rubio actually spoke to, the Democrats in the House, the Democrats in the Senate. I think it was, the Intelligence Committee, whatever it is. But all these different committees as well. So he told the Gang of Eight. He did, through Marco Rubio. And all of a sudden, it was like, oh, crap, now what's our talking point, right? This is, let's see. All right. You know what? I'm going to be honest. I don't know what this audio bite is, but let's hear it anyway.
Now, over time, those who are critical may feel vindicated.
Oh, this is Brit Hume. This is great. So Brit Hume talking about the Democrats as they continue to scream about Donald Trump doing the wrong thing. This is, again, Brit Hume.
Now, over time, those who are critical may feel vindicated if things start to go badly. But if they don't, they're going to be stuck with this. They're going to be the people that it will be argued were, didn't want to take this evil Iranian regime down. If the Iranian regime goes down and things turn out well in Iran, that will be a burden around their necks.
Well, it will be. And so we'll have to see ultimately what happens. This could be, and I've said this before, this could be the greatest thing Donald Trump ever does or did, or the worst. Like, it could be either one. Because if we end up in some sort of a huge Middle Eastern war, which I don't actually believe that's going to happen, but if we end up in a larger scale regional war, Lord help us if China, for whatever reason, gets involved with Iran and trying to help Iran militarily, then this could blow up into something really, really bad. I don't believe that that's going to happen, but if this ultimately goes well for Iran and we end up with a more, westernized Iran, and we get some people in there that are more interested in making money and selling oil on the open market and doing whatever it is that they can do to further the cause of the Iranian people, then, as Ted Cruz said, this could, and many have said, this could absolutely change not only the face of the Middle East, but the face of the world. And so we'll have to wait and see how this whole thing plays out. I want to welcome on into the program Senior Security Analyst for News Nation, our guest right now, and it's Richard Newton joining us. I guess your call sign is Tiger?
And Dan, good morning. It was. I commanded the first B-2 Stealth Bomber Squadron commander, and we were the Tigers, so the call sign stuck with me.
I love that. Now, you were a bomber pilot for many years, and again, now you're a Senior Security Analyst for News Nation. Appreciate you joining us here in Nashville. Let's talk about this first. Here in the last hour, we found out that three of our military airplanes were shot down by Kuwait. How does that happen? Now, luckily, the pilots all were able to eject safely, but walk us through how that happens.
Well, what's as far as been, we're now in our third 24-hour period. So we've had 2 goes as a military campaign planner. The first 24 hours kicked off about 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, then another 24 hours. Now we're in our third wave of 24 hours. By the way, extraordinarily bold, near flawless execution of an extraordinary historical joint U.S.-Israeli military campaign. However, this fog of war incident that occurred over Kuwait, you anticipate that, you plan for it, you don't want it at all as a combat pilot certainly over friendly territory. But I'm sure what happened was the friendly fire incident, either through lack of communication, obviously, or mistaking those 3 F-15 aircraft that were mistakenly shot down by air defenses. Thankfully, all 3 sets of cruisers, which is 6 United States Air Force airmen have been recovered safely, and I'm sure they're going to be anxious to get back in the fight. But that's this is the fog of war. You deal with it and you move on. You keep striking targets.
Lieutenant General Richard Newton joining us on WTN. All right, let's zoom out. You just said a little bit about the mission. We got Ayatollah al-Khamenei dead, 48 of his generals at least dead as well, attacks all across Iran. Tell me your thoughts on the scope of this attack. You called it, I think you said the word historic. Tell me how good of an attack was this? How well executed was it? Would you say this is on par with what we did to arrest Maduro and the first attack on Iran last summer?
Absolutely, well beyond the Maduro capture, and with his wife, by the way, who are in a federal jail in Brooklyn. But thus far, this has been, as I mentioned, a very bold execution. There's a lot of firsts here. Number one, the complexity. We had on the first 24 hours, 2,000 combat sorties, Dan, and so forth, flown by the United States and Israel. So the complexity of this in terms of that alone is extraordinary. The objectives has been to go after, right off the bat, was the leadership. Ayatollah Khamenei and his 40 plus of his henchmen are gone. They're off the map. We're focusing also on retaliatory capability and achieving air superiority. We have achieved air superiority, or at least on the cusp of that. Think of the size of Iran, 93 million people, about the size of Alaska, 2.5 times the size of Texas. That's extraordinary. And so what you're going to see in the next 48 hours in terms of scope, we're going to continue focusing on the Iranian retaliatory campaign, those ballistic missiles, those drones, those cruise missiles. The objective here is to get their threat ring getting smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of them threatening not only the United States forces, not only Israel, but our Gulf Arab nations and our allies. There's no nation in the Gulf region, I'm saying Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Jordan. None of these nations have been left off the map in terms of Iran striking back to them. So you're seeing a regional war, but you're also seeing what I believe is going to be continued diminishing of Iranian striking capabilities. And then you're going to focus on, part of the plan will be going into elements of how the regime has been sustained for decades, continue their leadership. Next man up, we're going to take them off the map, much like we did in the war on terror leading up to the takedown of bin Laden. You're going to see Islamic Republican Guard Corps. We're going to continue to attack their leadership, but also their capabilities, about 200,000 IRGC members. We're going to go after the besieged militia. These are about 1 million or so. They're the ones that swing the pipes in the streets and kill Iranian citizens at gunpoint, as we saw back in January. You're certainly going to see elements of the police state, their command and control, as well as their Iranian military industrial base that builds the ballistic missiles and the drones and the cruise missiles that threaten the U.S., Israel, and allies. A lot to unpack there, but that's in a nutshell what you're seeing has occurred thus far and what you're going to see in the next 48 to 96 hours in the coming days. And perhaps, as President Trump said at his presser, probably anticipate this up to 4 weeks.
Okay, so that is my next question, which is, do you believe that the president and our military will be able to keep that 4-week goal? Do you think it'll maybe be less than 4 weeks? Do you think it may stretch longer than that?
It depends. And that's exactly the ongoing discussions with General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, relaying commands as well as the perspectives of the president as the commander-in-chief to Admiral Brad Cooper, who's the commander of U.S. Central Command as well. But the focus is going to be on relentlessly going after a very rich target environment. And I guarantee you there are hundreds, if not thousands, of target folders that we will focus on. That it's not just air, it's air, sea-based, but also in today's warfare environment, cyber, specifically offensive cyber capabilities, things to disrupt the command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's to disrupt the ability for the Iranian regime to be able to hear and see and so forth. My problem with that, we saw during the extraordinarily well-executed capture of Madar. We saw just a very small snippet of that in exquisite, tactical surprise, the tactical capture of Maduro. What you're seeing now play out over the next several weeks is the grand strategy of that playing out and the operational piece of this that will stretch itself for the coming weeks.
Let's talk about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. They have, and you and I have spoken before, they have, they're more than just a military part of the Iranian government. I mean, they actually, they are embedded deeply in various parts of the Iranian government. President Trump said last night that some of these folks are coming in and because the president said he was going to give them immunity, and President Trump saying that some are calling them and laying down their arms and so forth. Have you seen any evidence of that? And how will we ever really know what's going on with the IRGC?
Well, I have not seen any evidence of that. However, the president is much closer to the fight than I am in terms of being updated on probably a minute-by-minute basis. However, as I mentioned, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they're the ones that kicked off the revolution back in March of 1979 and really created the basis, the infrastructure, the sustainment capability for the Ayatollahs and the mullahs to continue to maintain control over the 93 million Iranian citizens who want to break free of that, obviously. But they're the ones that have much sway and power in terms of keeping the theocracy regime in power. They're also the ones that are responsible for the organization, the training, and the equipping of terrorist organizations, those proxies. Iran has been the largest exporter of terror in the world, and that source of that export capability is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Think Hezbollah in Lebanon. Think Hamas in Gaza. Think Houthis in Yemen. Think about the Iraqi Shiite militia in Iraq and elsewhere, as well as sponsoring these terror cells that are around the world, pockets of them. But this really emanates out of the training and the control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So they are key. Whether or not they come over to the side of the Iranian people who really are now destined to reclaim their nation or not, that's to be seen. But they get a choice. I guarantee you this military campaign with all the mights of U.S. power, Israeli power, and others will find, fix, target, and kill every last one of them if that's the objective here. But we'd like to, if I'm the President of the United States, as well as Admiral Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, we'd like to see them, turn in their arms and try to come back over to supporting the Islamic or disregard the Iranian people rather than creating havoc against the Iranian people.
Lieutenant General Richard Newton, sir, hold on one sec for 15 seconds. I've got to check the traffic real quick. I'm going to ask you about a couple of things coming back. Number one is, what have we learned, if anything, about Iran's military as far as their response goes? Has there been any surprise where, we were surprised that maybe they were stronger than we thought or maybe weaker than we thought? And also, I want to talk to you about what happened in Austin, Texas, where we had what is being called, and I believe that it is, a terror attack there by somebody clearly who is an Iranian sympathizer. So those two questions coming up. What have we learned about Iran's military in the last couple of days as they respond to our attacks and Israel's attacks?
Well, Dan, no surprises thus far. We had anticipated that they would attempt to be relentless in terms of their retaliatory operational aims, against the United States and certainly against Israel. Perhaps what we had not anticipated, that they would make direct attacks with their ballistic missiles and their drones and cruise missiles against Gulf Arab nations there in the region. As I mentioned, Oman, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and so forth. But my sources tell me, and from my perspective, their response specifically with short-range ballistic missiles ranging out to about 600 miles, and their medium-range ballistic missiles from about 600 miles to about 1,500 miles range capability, and their drones has been a little bit less robust than perhaps what we saw last year in 2025, leading up to the Israeli 11-day air campaign capstoned by that B-2 bomber strike against their nuclear weapons development facilities on June 22nd. That's not to say that they are a potent ballistic missile capabilities. They have other abilities to go after, U.S. interests there, obviously, and U.S. forces as well as Israel and so forth. But what's happening now is a systematic, methodical air, sea, and cyber campaign to go after specifically their retaliatory capability, their ballistic missiles, their cruise missiles, and their drones, as well as their not only the launchers of those ballistic missiles, but the stockpiles. So what you're going to see is that what I call, think of Iran as a major threat ring in the Mideast that threatens, U.S., Israel, and Gulf nations. That threat ring is going to get smaller till about nothing, because the United States and Israel are relentlessly going to go after those retaliatory capabilities. So that's what you're seeing play out here. That's going to take some time. Again, as I mentioned to put our listeners in perspective, Iran is about the size of Alaska. It's 2.5 times the size of Texas. That's a lot of territory to cover. But now that we have achieved air superiority, and you're going to see that we're going to go after waves of attacks from the air, and those sea-based Tomahawk cruise missiles, and well as using very effective offensive cyber capabilities.
We know, sir, that Joe Biden had a wide-open border for 4 years. A couple of outlets have been talking about what, frankly, talk radio has been talking about for a long time, which is the possibility of sleeper cells in America. We did see what happened over the weekend in Austin, Texas, a guy wearing a Property of Allah T-shirt and Iranian T-shirt underneath that sweatshirt. They go to his home. He had a bunch of photographs of Iranian leaders, and he also had a Quran in his vehicle. How worried are you? And he killed a bunch of folks there in Texas in a bar. How worried are you that we're going to see more of these kinds of attacks? The guy, by the way, was from Senegal.
Well, I think absolutely. Secretary of Department of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has raised the threat warning, that being more of an awareness for the American people, as well as the FBI on down with state law enforcement officials down to local. I slept well last night, frankly, because I have great confidence in, the protection that those federal entities as well as local provide for, my family and I and so forth. So I want to underscore to the American people, and certainly to our listeners, that this is not to walk on eggshells and look around every corner. However, there are threats out there. And as I mentioned in our previous commentary with regard to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they train these terrorist extremists in small pockets to go around the world, in Europe, and certainly there are existing in the United States. But I'm very confident, especially with regard to DHS and the FBI, and now the much more effective synchronization and communication since 9/11 with local law enforcement and state law enforcement as well. This one actor that you have, one bad actor in Austin, Texas, we've got, 340 million, people in the United States, of course. But notice how that action on his part and the fact that local law enforcement, certainly communicating with federals, unfortunately, he acted, but the reaction was so fast and swift. But we're just going to have to anticipate that, and the fact that we're striking targets against Iran right now, we would anticipate perhaps those sleeper cells, as you say, to be perhaps alerted and see if they take action. It reminds me back when when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait back in August of 1990, and then we acted with Desert Storm in January of 1991 for several weeks. There was a rise in certainly the threat of those who want to do bad against the United States and American citizenry, perhaps Islamic, radical Islamic terrorist cells and so forth acting. That was subdued, just like this one was subdued as well, but we have to be on air. My final point is, to our listeners, if you see something that just doesn't look right, again, I'm not talking eggshells or there's a bad person around every bush. I'm not suggesting that. But if you see something, say something to a local law enforcement. That's really where the citizenry comes out and helps support stem what any small chance that we could be threatened.
Senior Security Analyst for News Nation and our guest, Lieutenant General Richard Newton. How can folks find you on X?
I've got my website, lieutenantgeneralnewton.com. I can also be found on News Nation as a senior national security contributor, and I'm on air constantly. So I'll be coming to your radio or your TV anytime soon. But I'm always delighted to be with you, Dan, and have a really great conversation. And I'm sure we'll be talking more.
Absolutely.
Final point is, I think really my thoughts and prayers are with those 3 Americans who were killed in action in Kuwait, as well as the 5 severely wounded. President Trump has expressed his heartwarming regards to the family members of those. Final point is, it's another demonstration As noble as I believe this cause is, frankly, in support of U.S. national security objectives, freedom is not free. We have a son-in-law serving in the United States Air Force Special Operations as a lieutenant colonel. He's been serving 7 combat deployments and so forth. The purpose here of what we're doing is to compel our American men and women to serve valiantly, yes, but to come home and continue with their lives. But again, we have 2 million men and women in uniform who volunteer to go to the sound of guns. And our thoughts and prayers are with those 3 Americans killed in action and those wounded. They've got a long road to come back, but nonetheless, we should be very proud of our military, be very proud of, think of what the Trump administration has done here. This is going to be a long fight, but it's one that with great purpose. And I believe that we are going to change the course of the Mideast for a better world for generations to come.
All right, Lieutenant General Richard Newton joining us. Thank you very much. And absolutely, I would love to have you back. It is 6:55, running late, but worth it.